Good evening, and we're back for chapter 11 of Singer on the Sand. And I hope that you're all cuddled down in your pajamas and you're rested and you're ready to listen to chapter 11. And tonight we find out, well, last week, if you'll remember, the teacher rescued Satu from the fire mountain just as it was opening up. But Satu was trusting in God to see him even through this trial. And even if he wasn't going to be rescued, Satu continued trusting in the God of heaven. So tonight we learn about the fire mountain. It was late in the night, and the big teacher pulled his boat through the calm water toward the light that shone from the door and windows of his own home on the sand. Satu lay in the bow of the boat with his head on a roll of fish nets where the teacher had put him. "Rest now," the deep, kind voice had said. "This has been a frightening day, a terrible experience for you. Don't talk, don't look back, just rest." It was easy for Satu to rest. He didn't even need to open his eyes to know that the big teacher sat there before him with a paddle in each hand, and he knew that every stroke of those powerful arms brought them nearer home. Home? He wondered whether there would ever be a home for him again within his father's house. The noise of the volcano receded into the distance, and the thundering sounded far away to Satu's ears as the big teacher brought the boat alongside the wharf. He raised up then and saw at once that never before had the mountain behaved in so wild a manner. He knew now why the teacher had told him not to look backwards. Surely no living person on Sangir would sleep this night, not with that monster blowing out sheets of flame and shattering all the earth with thunder. Even before the teacher picked up the rattan thong to fasten the boat, Hans scrambled aboard. He must have been waiting and watching here. You were there, I knew it. He threw his arms around his friend and dragged him from the boat. Satu still shook a little and felt weak, but he had begun to feel much better. The two boys stood together on the wharf and looked out toward the fire mountain. Although it was deep night and a peculiar murky quality dimmed the air about them, Satu could see that something had happened to the fire mountain. He clutched Hans' arms. "Look, it has sunk. The fire is coming out of the sea." "Wait," Hans said. "Wait." Then Satu saw that flames gushed from two places, one far up at the mountain's summit and another down near the surface of the ocean. "It has been like that since sundown," Hans told him. The island boy felt his body tremble. And the big teacher, he knew? He saw that? And yet he came for me? Now Hans' mother ran out of the house on the sand with Marta in her arms. The big teacher took the little girl and comforted her against his breast, for she was crying with fear at the sight of the mountain and the unnatural heaving of the earth. With his arm around his wife, the big man turned to the boys. "You will stay here with us tonight, Satu. I'm sure no one in the village expects you home. It might even be dangerous for Guru Mula to see you." With a surge of sharp sadness, Satu answered, "I will stay." After the teacher and his wife had taken little Marta to the house, Hans and Satu still stood watching the volcano. Satu could not forget that just a short time ago he had been there on the fire mountain, with the awful crack opening under his hands and the fire and noise and the smell of brimstone in his face. Then his mind came back to here and now. He realized that Hans was talking to him. "Your father wouldn't let any of the Christian people go to the hills," Hans said. "Have the village people gone to the hills?" "Yes, most of them went this afternoon. Tama went with them. Only the Islam teachers and a few of the village people are up there on the hill back of us." "Where are the Christian people now?" They are at their homes in the village. My father told them to go home and try to rest, and to come back if the mountain got worse before morning." The teacher's wife laid mats on the floor of the big room and told the two boys they might sleep there. But both of them were too excited to sleep, and in the end they sat outside on the salt grass and watched the fire mountain. "How did you know where I was?" Satu asked Hans. "Well, I felt sorry because Gola wouldn't let me go along to fish, and I didn't feel like playing in the sand village anymore. I took Marta in, and after we had eaten and she was asleep, I climbed up to our perch in the rocks. I thought about what you had told me of the meeting they had in Guru Mullah's house last night and how they were trying to force you to follow Islam. Then I began to feel afraid." "Could you see Gola's boat from up there?" "Oh, yes. It was just a little speck out there, but I could see it hang there like a black dot on the horizon. I looked at the volcano, too, and it seemed to be acting worse than we had ever seen it before." "Did you stay there the rest of the day?" "No. After I watched the boat and the mountain for a while, I saw something was going on over at the village. People were packing their cooking pots and rolling their mats. Then I saw them climbing up the path to the hills. I came down then because I thought if they were going to go up to the highland, maybe we should go too." "Why did you decide not to go?" "The Christian people all came over to our house. They said that the chief had told them to go to the big teacher for protection, that the fire spirits were about to destroy the house on the sand." "Weren't you all afraid?" "Oh, yes, I suppose so. But my father had them all stay, and we sang and prayed and sang some more, and now they have gone back to their houses to sleep." "They won't sleep this night," Satu said as he watched the volcano. "I still don't know how you found out I was out there." Toward evening, Hans went on with his story. "When I thought the fishing boat was about to return, I climbed back up to the rocks to see if it was coming. I saw it all right, not far from the fire mountain. I couldn't understand why they pulled in so close to the volcano. It looked to me as if they paddled directly toward it. When I saw the boat touch the beach, you know, the place where we saw the big bird, I knew something bad had happened. It was just sundown, but after the boat came on toward the landing here, I thought I could see something on the sand. It looked like that big bird we watched, but I was sure it must be you." "Did you meet the boat when Gola and Guru Mullah came back?" "Yes, I ran down from the rocks and I waited for them here. I am sure they expected me to be here. They both looked very sad and said they had bad news for the chief, that you had stood up in the boat to help haul in a net and had fallen into the sea. Gola told of how they tried to get you out, but your body was all tangled up with the net, and while they worked to get you loose, a shark came up." "And then?" "And then I ran back to our house, shouting in our own language to my father. I told him they had put you on the volcano. Of course they must have heard me shout, but I suppose they thought I shouted from fright because of what had happened to you." "And then the new mouth of fire opened on the volcano?" "It had already opened before the men got to shore. They saw it. I think they were frightened, but they did not leave the fish. They took it all up to the Islam teachers' houses. It took several trips, and the other men came down and helped them." Hans explained to Satu how all the Christian people had come out to see the new mountain of fire in the volcano, but the big teacher did not tell anyone that Satu was out on the mountain. Of course, none of the village people knew that Satu had gone with Gola, and the day had been full of terror and excitement. Before the men had finished unloading the fish, the teacher had sent the Christian people home. "And then he came after me?" "Yes. As soon as they finished with the fish, my father got ready to go. I wanted to go with him, but he said the volcano looked so threatening that he would rather I didn't go. So I waited here. It was a long time." "Hans, it is the God of heaven who saved me. The song is true." "What do you mean?" "A mighty mountain is our God, a wall that will not falter." Flames from the fire mountain still flashed across the sky, and the earth trembled and thunder rolled and echoed beneath them. The two boys sat close together on the salt grass close to the house on the sand, and after a while the big teacher came and sat with them. All along the high peaks of the inland hills, tiny lights flickered and winked into the murky night. Campfires of terrified people who had fled from the fury of the volcano. "Maybe we should go up there too," Hans said. "No," the teacher said. "No, I have thought about it, and we have prayed about it all afternoon. Of course we could go, but it would mean a fight on the trail, because the chief forbade any of the Christian people to leave the village. He thinks the fire spirits are angry and intend to destroy us. This is a time for us to stand still and see what God will do for us." "What about Satu?" Hans asked. "Of course no one knows where Satu is. This is another good reason for us to stay here in our house. We can hide him here. Guru Mula would stop at nothing now." It was past midnight, and they all went into the house and lay down, but the trembling of the earth and the noise of the thunder kept them awake. Before dawn, all the Christian people came back. None of them had slept. All of them seemed to gather courage from the big teacher's strong faith and his songs of praise. When Tama heard from Hans that Gola's fishing boat had already gone out into the sea and that Satu had gone along, all his terrible sadness came back. He crouched on the log wharf for a few minutes, looking at the tiny speck that was Gola's fishing boat. He knew that Guru Mula had not waited until evening because he had feared that Chief Meriton would interfere, that in the end he would not allow his son to be taken to the volcano. Again a tempest of anger swept the witch man's mind and soul, but this time his fury was directed at Guru Mula. He must go at once and tell the chief. Without doubt, Chief Meriton thought Satu was playing on the beach with the big teacher's children. Before Tama got back to the village, he saw that the villagers were preparing to leave. He hurried to the chief's house and told him what had happened. The chief looked at him, but his eyes were dull as dark pebbles under murky water, and he spoke sternly. "Let him be. Do you not see how angry the fire spirits are? The village people are all too frightened to stay here. We must all go to the hills. It must certainly be because of my son that they are so angry." Tama helped the people pack up their things, and they set out on the trail. One of the Christian men asked if they might go along. "No, you may not go. You have chosen to follow the big teacher. Now go and tell him that you are afraid. Go sing your songs and pray your prayers, but don't let me catch any of you on the hill trail, and don't try to cut your way up through the jungle either. I have set Guru Mula to watch and see not a single Christian goes anywhere but to the house on the beach." Tama could see that the chief raged with anger and terrible sorrow. He decided to say nothing more. Twice he made the journey up to the central ridge of hills, and it was after midnight when he finally came back to the village. He knew that no one remained now but the Christians. He looked at the fire mountain. It belched forth more fire. A new mouth had opened. The thunderings were louder, the quakings the worse in his memory, and Satu was out there. What must it be like out there? Tama went down to the beach. He looked toward the teacher's house. There was no light. He could not think that they were asleep, but at least they were inside the house. Perhaps they would not see him. Anyhow, he didn't care. He bent to untie his own boat. With trembling hands, he reached for his paddle. Then a dark form loomed beside him. "Ah, Chief Meriton, does your thought go with mine?" "My thought goes with yours," the chief said in a low, choked voice. He looked at the volcano and his whole body shook. He could scarcely speak. "It is dreadful, terrible. I guess they are angry at me. Satu is out there. Gola told me." The men settled themselves in the boat and pushed off. They were halfway to the volcano before they spoke again. Then the chief said, "Satu will expect me. He will know that I must come." Now the men could no longer talk. The raging of the mountain forbade. Tama guided the boat and made for the only possible landing on the southern side, the sandy strip of beach. Had it been possible, Tama would have turned back. The mountain now raged at him like a living creature. The fire and smoke and hot blasts of foul air, the crackling thunder that tore through the depths of the ocean and land, seemed directed at him alone. Was he not the medicine man of this village? Was he not the witchman who had controlled the spirits and powers of evil? Now Tama felt that he had been mistaken all along about the reason for the fire spirit's anger. It must have been at about that time Satu was thrown on the volcano that the new mouth of flame had opened. Now they were almost upon the beach. Flames reddened the sky and showed the sand as bare as the top of the rock. No person was there. Tama would have sworn that he had already tasted the dregs of everything terrible and grievous, but this was worse. The chief threw himself upon the sand. Then Tama saw the crack that opened down to the water's edge. Even as he watched, a breath of stench belched up from the wide crack. Terrible thunder spoke from the depths, and the sea boiled up in it like a sizzling rice pot. Tama dragged the chief to the boat and paddled back to the shore without a word. "I will go to the hills," the chief said after they had tied the boat. "I can get to my people before morning. I will go to Guru Mula's house. I will see if I can find anything we don't already know." The chief waved this aside with a gesture of complete hopelessness. "It's no use at all. But do you think it is quite safe at the Islam teacher's house?" "Oh yes, it is probably safe as anything on this side of the island." The men parted and Tama hurried up the new trail to Guru Mula's house. By the time the sun rose and looked down on Sangir, everything on the southwest side of the island had changed. The village was deserted. All the Christian people were gathered in the garden at the big teacher's house. The chief and the other villagers had fled to the high ridge of hills because they could no longer bear the thundering of the fire mountain and the shaking earth. The air hung heavy with doom. The smell of brimstone choked everyone, and above it all the sun shone down with terrible heat. Only above the volcano clouds hung dark. Fierce lightning shot through them and tore them apart to showing bursting flames. From the house of Guru Mula, Tama looked down on the group of Christians gathered within the little garden of the house on the sand. "You know they are in great danger there," Guru Mula said. "A big wave from that mountain would sweep them away like a handful of sand." "Yes, I guess it would." Tama's hammering heart felt as if it had swollen to fill his chest. He was thinking of little Marta. He could see her dancing around among the people like a butterfly. Then Tama heard the voice of the big teacher raised in song. The melody rose and fell in the troubled air. It swelled and died away and rose again and again, as though in answer to the thunder of the volcano. The teacher must have translated the words of the song into the island language, for Tama could understand. "A mighty mountain is our God, a wall that will not falter." What could such words mean? God, a mountain? Then the thought of Satu pushed into his tormented mind. He trembled to think of what that boy must have suffered there on the fire mountain. Before what? He faced it at last, before that hideous crack on the beach of the volcano swallowed him up. And that's the end of our chapter 11. You know, when we trust in God, God will see us through. I wonder what Tama is going to decide to do next week. Will he decide to stay with the Islam teachers, or will he decide to give his heart to the Lord completely and join the Christians on the sand? So we will be back for chapter 11 next week. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to say your prayers for the missionaries. Thank you. Good night.